WoW Killer is a production of amove.tv. Check out amove TV for many more podcasts, multiple about Blizzard games. And for more of Taliesin's WoW coverage, check out Taliesin and Evitel on YouTube and twitch.tv. Greetings and welcome everyone to WoW Killer. I'm Garrett, joined as always by Taliesin, and today we are finishing up. We're finishing Taliesin, our 4 straight weeks of Afterlives coverage. Unless I thought you were going to say
we're finishing WoW Killer.
We're finishing the show. This is it.
I didn't. No more WoW Killer.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
And a collective sigh of here's Velen. The Velen sigh. It's over. The WoW Killer is over, brother.
You don't know this about me.
No more WoW Killer. So there you go. It was fun. Well, some fun was had. Well, okay. It happened. WoW Killer happened, but it won't be remembered.
Yeah, you don't know this about me, but when I choose to end podcasts, I don't talk to anyone I'm working on the show with. I just get on the show and tell them it's over with no warning.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you do it by text.
And I definitely end shows right before content for the game we're covering is about to become the most interesting it's been in years.
When I finish a podcast, I do it by text. I send a text to someone and I go, I'm finishing the podcast. I've already blocked you on social media. Thanks, bye. So I don't say thanks, obviously.
See, when that happens...
Can I ask you a personal question?
Yes.
You know the intro to WoW Killer, where the WoW Killer, when we do it live, like a WoW Killer screen comes up and then music plays, and then your voice says, "Welcome to WoW Killer," like that. Are you doing that live or is that recorded?
That's recorded.
Well, I didn't know, did I? And are you playing the music live or is it recorded?
So, Taliesin, there's this thing called mixing that you can do in a variety of programs.
Are you at least miming to it when it plays?
No, usually I'm like stretching. I've definitely picked my nose on at least one occasion. Sometimes I'm chasing my cat out of the room because my dog is sniffing the cat's butt and it's gross.
That is gross, and also nothing to do with the episode. I can't believe you distracted from the actual point of the episode again already before we've barely even started. Today, ladies and gentlemen, like Garrett's not telling you, but I will. I'll be the host. Today, we're talking about the Revendreth cinematic. Afterlives Revendreth. We're going to be talking about the cinematic. Yes, we might be talking spoilers about the Revendreth zone. That might just happen. Who knows? I dare say it probably will. And also, Garrett, something I'd like to add as an amendum to this. That's a word that I invented just now.
An addendum?
Also, I'd like to raise with you the possibility for after our discussion about Revendreth, the possibility that maybe it's not the last cinematic. Because, Garrett, there are 4 covenants in the Afterlife cinematic, but you know the game Shadowlands, though, Garrett?
The game Shadowlands? I know the game World of Warcraft with the expansion Shadowlands. I don't know the game Shadowlands. It seems like they should probably change that name for litigious reasons.
There's 5 covenants in Shadowlands, Garrett.
Ooh.
But there's only 4 cinematics. But there's 5 covenants, though.
Well,
there's only 4 cinematics.
Well, there's 5 zones. There's only 4.
Though. So I would like to posit to you right now that as we record this on Wednesday, and they still haven't given us a release date for the pre-patch, which you'd have expected yesterday if it was going to release on the 6th of October, which it really, really needs to.
Probably should.
Yeah. I posit this to you. I posit that tomorrow on Thursday, which is the traditional day for releasing the Afterlife cinematic, when Garrett will be sitting in his house going, "Oh, sorry, it's not, hang on. Oh, no Afterlife cinematic today. I can relax and sit back and just speak like this into my microphone all day long." And in fact, Garrett, there will be another cinematic, and it will be about the Moor, and it'll be about the jailer, and everyone will go, "I can't believe I'm saying this, but Taliesin was right."
Listen, Tally, I'm sorry. Listen, Taliesin, I have a retort to that, and I'm going to do it in this voice. No. My retort is, I think we'll get Jailer short, but it will not be in this style. It's going to be full CG Blizzard cinematic orgasm wonderfulness, and we're all going to freak out.
I personally agree with that, but do you think it could come tomorrow with a pre-patch release date?
I don't want it to, because I just want the pre-patch to come tomorrow.
Well, I don't really want it to either, because I'm a bit bored of having to do like a cinematic analysis video and a weekly reset in like 3 days every weekend, because I release them on a Thursday. Now, here's the thing. All the Warbringers cinematics used to release on a Tuesday, which gave me like a couple of days to do my cinematic analysis videos before I had to do the weekly reset, and it's been causing me a lot of shit.
Oh, cool. So we are actually going to change today's topic in real time from Revendreth to complaining about life as a creator and Blizzard's release schedule, because frankly, Hearthstone not being consistent at all on the day it announces new things for the game, or even how far in advance of new things they announce things for the game, has really thrown a monkey wrench into my planning of the Angry Chicken. So I'd really like to lodge some complaints.
Very fair. And do you know what, Garrett? At this stage, I'd rather no content at all. I want to rest, Garrett. I want to be able to sleep.
Sure, we'll go with that. We'll have to see, right? Like, we're not getting pre-patch this week, right? We're coming to.
Oh, we're definitely 100% not getting pre-patch. Traditionally, they give us a release date for pre-patch 2 weeks before it actually happens, because of PvP and stuff like that, to give people fair warning.
And also all of the other things that goes away with the expansion patch hitting, right?
Yeah. And for that to happen for October the 6th, now there's 2 weeks worth of questing in the pre-patch, but most people think the pre-patch would be a month or 3 weeks long.
I sure as hell hope so.
Basically, they have to release it. They have to kind of announce it this week to stick with that program and for it to come out on October the 6th.
I've recently decided that I
think there's going to be a pretend. It'll be real, but a secret cinematic tomorrow. That's what I think. I just think that I can't help it.
I mean, I want to finish leveling my Alliance Warrior in the new leveling system, because I want to see how weirdly and disjointed it is when I start at a much higher level than 1. Yeah. So they need to. I need more time, Taliesin.
Exactly.
I need more time. Not that it takes a lot of time, but what else am I going to? I also got to get in my Hearthstone play. And
there was a secret Lords of War animation for WoD. When it was supposed to be finished, the Murad one came out the week after and surprised everyone. And the Saurfang cinematic was a complete surprise. Was never announced. It just dropped. It was never teased. It was never previewed. It just dropped.
Oh, yeah.
I think we might be getting. I think there's going to be one tomorrow, Garrett.
I hope so.
I can feel it. I can feel it in my water and in my bones.
Can you feel it coming in the air tonight? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yes.
Wonderful.
No, tomorrow night. You haven't been listening, Garrett. Tomorrow, not tonight. Today's Wednesday.
We are recording this on Wednesday, September 23rd. So if Taliesin is to be right, he has to be right on September 24th.
And the thing is, by the time this what is it? It's a podcast. By the time this podcast actually comes out and people listen to it, you will already know if I was right or not.
Unless you're one of our diehards that listens on the day it releases.
Yes. And that would give a dramatic irony where the audience member listening to the thing knows something that the characters in the thing don't know. It's called dramatic irony. And it's funny you should mention that, Garrett, because another thing that has quite a lot of dramatic irony in it is the Afterlives Revendreth cinematic that we've been talking about since this podcast began.
We definitely have, and definitely didn't.
That's what this podcast is about.
We definitely didn't trickle around multiple topics on top of this like every other World of Warcraft podcast that has ever been created.
Exactamundo.
And even if we did, it would be okay because this is our podcast.
Yeah, exactly. We ain't got no bosses. They can't tell us what to do. We make our own rules.
We do.
Although I have compiled a performance report for you for the year, Garrett, and I will be sending it to you.
Oh boy.
And listen, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying maybe keep an eye open for alternative lines of work. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, okay. I mean, this has been the latest I have ever been consistently to anything in my life.
Yeah, that's right. It's all your fault.
It is.
Anyway, Garrett, what did you think of the Revendreth cinematic?
I didn't like it as much as I thought I was going to. If we're gonna like get right into it with the hot takes. I
hated all of these Afterlife
no,
cinematics.
I didn't. I really.
If it's not the Bastion one, you don't want to know. Every week when we come onto this podcast that we do together.
So they definitely okay. I definitely think they started with the strongest one by like a landslide victory. That said, I really did enjoy the other two. I know we had some finer. I had some finer points that I wanted to drill down into in a vaguely critical way last week for the Ardenweald one, but I really like the Ardenweald one. And the more I watch it, the more I like it. I've watched it a few more times, and it's just good. That thing just stands on its own. It's great world building. I'm a big fan of it, and the music just makes me feel emotions. It's great. This one was just so straightforward. I was really hoping for some Kael'thas, and this had 100% less Kael'thas than I thought it was going to have, which was to say no Kael'thas at all.
I did tell you it wasn't going to have Kael'thas, didn't I?
Listen. I know you told me, but I don't listen to you. So
what? Do you see my joke? No,
I did. I see what you did there.
Well, it was incredibly straightforward, and it was, as predicted, basically just Sidon being a bit of a dick.
Yes, I liked the overall tone was great, and I just like looking at all of these. I just love the style so freaking much. I could just stare at them all day long. There was just something about the way this one went on and on about anima, where I was just like, it made it feel like a game mechanic they were trying to over-explain to me. I don't know. It kind of...
Really?
Yeah. It's the only time I felt this so far. Like
the whole setup of the entire storyline of Shadowlands.
Well, I think it was... honestly, I think it's in comparison to Ardenweald that makes me feel this way, because I think Ardenweald did a really interesting thing, and like, they just... I mean, this one shows and tells, but Ardenweald, it was just showing us, like without words, how this kind of functions within its zone.
Okay, so here's the thing. You say that Ardenweald showed, whereas Revendreth telled, and I would showed and telled. I would disagree, and I would say that Ardenweald showed, whereas Revendreth showed as well, but then told something different, and that's the entire point. Like, the entire point of the Revendreth cinematic is like the contrast and the difference between what is being said and what you see with your own eyes. And it's very important, obviously, to establish what's happening in Revendreth. It's very important to establish like the hierarchy that's going on in Revendreth. It's very important to establish Denathrius as a big baddie. And like, what did I say last week when we were talking about whether the Winter Queen is a goodie or not? I said, these characters are very Shakespearean. They present as they are most of the time. So if someone is presenting as good as the Winter Queen, I think it's right to take them as being that good. And you can see, I said, wait till next week with the Revendreth one. We are supposed to think that Sidon-Athris is a goodie when we go to Revendreth in the questing in Shadowlands. Like, when we get there, we are going there to help Sidon-Athris. And we spend the first half of that zone doing that, like doing stuff he asks us to do.
Too much pre-knowledge. This is irrelevant. No, this happens after Revendreth. The game isn't out yet, Taliesin.
Yeah, no, exactly.
No, you need to. This
is what I'm saying. And yet, I said last week. I said, despite the fact that there is a twist, like Sidon-Athris
still going too far. No, this is all stuff that happens afterwards.
Despite the fact that Sidon-Athris being a baddie is supposed to be a twist that we only learn in game. I said, look, these characters are so Shakespearean that you will see there's going to be, after that Revendreth cinematic, despite the fact it would spoil the twist, like, I'm not spoiling that twist because like the Revendreth cinematic just spoiled the twist, because these are Shakespearean characters who present as they are.
I think that's fair, but it's just like not where I focus, because again, like, I just look at this like this has to stand on its own because that all happens after this. But at the same time, I agree with you. It'd be like saying they spoil the twist of the general in Vol'dun in BFA. It's like, you saw that coming a mile away. The guy was a total dick. But where was I going to go with this? Again, this is all much the same way like I want to hammer home that like my kind of contrary thoughts when we talked about Ardenwood last week were really minor. This is really minor, but there's just something about like the middle point of the speech in this where his guy was just going on and on about anima, where I was like, we get it. It's a game mechanic that we're going to have to grind. We get it. I get it. It's important. Like it felt like when I go to Disney and they're trying to make in-universe reasons why I should buy a lightsaber at Galaxy's Edge. It's like, I get that I'm going to have to give you my money to have this experience. Like, just get on with it. Like,
I feel like I almost couldn't disagree with you more, because like if you think that cinematic was about anima, then I almost want to say that I feel like you've missed the thing that the cinematic is actually about.
No, I get what it was about. It was just, I don't know. I don't know what I guess my short, getting out of the expectation of I just wanted Kael'thas. I think my expectation was for more of, I don't know, acts to play out with the characters in question instead of, like, I get it was a stylistic choice to have Denathrius kind of give this speech and then just show and just do a slice of life and kind of just check in on all the various classes of people that reside in Revendreth. I get that, but I was just, I guess, taking into account all of the other ones that came in before this, and whether we were dealing with new characters or old characters that we know, we were watching them take action. And in this one, it was just kind of, here's a quote-unquote hero shot of Denathrius, and then we're just going to buzz around the place. It just, for some reason, I don't know. I also was like really excited about this because of my love of all things extremely emo, gothic, and vampire. And I just thought it was a little dull. I just thought it was a little dull.
Yeah, I mean, it was shorter than the others. You're right in that it was a lot more straightforward. There's very little kind of action that happens in it that kind of changes anything that's going on in the cinematic. So there's no real kind of tipping point in the expansion where someone's like mind is changed, or someone decides to do something about something, or decides to stop something happening, or decides that they're going to do like. There's nothing about that, because the only kind of character that we are associated with throughout the entire cinematic is Denathrius himself, having that kind of like political broadcast almost that the entire cinematic is framed as. Now, for me, that's awesome, because it was enjoyable and fun, and for me it was fun to see the team having fun with it, because it's so silly and it's so stupid, and the pastiche, almost classical music, which is just way over the top, civilized and relaxing and nice, like lift music.
It literally sounds like the Titanic going down in the orchestra.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, nice. Yeah. Absolutely. Like, everything's fine. Relax and keep calm, carry on, sort of thing. And very much that. But I've got a soft spot for those kind of dystopian kind of like government dramas. I like, give me some 1984, give me some anything like that, and I'm completely down with it. Give me some Brazil, and it was very much evoking that, and that's like so right up my alley. It's totally pulling my strings, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed what they did with it, and like, it's basically setting Sire Denathrius up as the Sheriff of Nottingham, which means we get to be Robin Hood. And everyone loves being Robin Hood, right? Like, he's going out there. He's like, okay, guys, we're all in this together. We all have to, rich and poor, we all have to make sacrifices because, Richard the Lionheart is being captured in the Crusades and being held for ransom. So we need to up these taxes, and we all need to, like, we all have to, and really, it's only the poor giving, and all the rich, like, yeah. And then suddenly Robin Hood, my character, comes along later on, and we're all like, pew, pew, pew. Screw you, Sheriff of Nottingham. I'm going to steal from you to give to the poor. And that's what we do. And who doesn't like being Robin Hood?
What does it say about me where I would rather be like the bougie martini sipping vampire?
Well, you get to do that as well, because of course, because don't forget, Robin Hood is a hereditary lord. in canon. You know, he wasn't born poor. He was a lord who gave up his title to become an outlaw. He became a lord again afterwards when Richard Lionheart returned. And likewise in Revendreth, you know, the guy that you kind of follow to get rid of Denathrius and put in place is also like a lord. So it's not like you're creating a people's republic, okay? You're maintaining the status quo, but just with a nicer guy up top. So you still get to enjoy all of that, like vampire Revendrethy, let's have a party, let's drink wine, let's listen to like fake classical music stuff. You still get to do all of that, but first of all, you get to be a bit of Robin Hood.
Fair.
Best of both worlds, if you ask me.
I still had fun with it. It's like these are just like minor little things, and like again, if I think I might put Ardenweald above Maldraxxus now. So when we talked last week, I said I think they had come out kind of in the order of how much I liked them, but I think the order may now be Bastion, Ardenweald, Maldraxxus, this in terms of how much I enjoyed all of these shorts.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I can't even really like some of this. Like I'm kind of working out now, but I can't even quite put my finger on why, because I should like this, because I love snooty elf talk, okay? Like it's one of my favorite things in the world. It's why I love Blood Elves so very, very much. Like it's great. And that's like all this was just like snooty elf talk put over creepy gothic vampire wonderfulness. And just for some reason I was just kind of like, I don't know, I liked the other ones more.
Well, that's fine. That's okay. You're allowed to like the other ones more. That's absolutely fine. Yeah. What would have given you what you wanted from this cinematic?
You're making me armchair right. That always makes me feel like
no. Just like you. I mean,
I think would have liked to have seen.
What you feel was missing when you finished that cinematic with the hole in your soul, and you were like, I am unsatisfied right now. Like what shape was that hole?
I think I was hoping for a little bit more of a beating you over the head with this is the last stop before the maw. Like visually represented at some point. Like
Okay, that's interesting because for me that's exactly what the cinematic did. Because you've seen like you've seen like the problems going on in the Shadowlands, okay? Mm-hmm. You know, there has been mention of the drought.
Yep.
Not in the Bastion one, fair enough, but there has been mention of the drought in the other two cinematics. You've seen it very explicitly in the Ardenweald one. It's a major part of the story.
Yeah, that and this one, and part of what I liked was the showing the difference of how two leaders handle the drought, because you've got the Winter Queen who is still having to make tough decisions, but is letting her subjects make that choice, and then you've got Denathrius who is just completely removing personal choice out of the equation.
Yeah, and also not suffering at all, and that's kind of the point. But so for me, you saw like there are problems in the Shadowlands with all of these cinematics, and then you got to this one, and this one says, and this guy is the problem. Like this is, you know, like. It's not really a spoiler because we know about the first raid and stuff, but you know, story spoilers here.
Okay, like again, this is where I really want to push back and say I don't care. I'm not considering that because I haven't seen it yet.
But that doesn't. I mean, but you've seen that Denathrius is like the boss of the raid, right?
No.
Okay. Shit, man.
I've intentionally avoided that information.
You're on the Instance podcast, and you don't know that Denathrius is the boss of the first raid. You're on the Instance podcast. What do you talk about on the Instance? I don't understand. How do you tell the news?
The news focus. So I have a very clear delineation in how we've talked about this before, Talia. So I have a very clear delineation on how
You're ignoring the first instance of the actual expansion.
It's not out yet.
You know the expansion is called Shadowlands?
It's not out yet.
You know there's a new expansion coming.
I know this is a bit.
Do you know the release date? What do you need to know? I'll tell you. I know all about it.
So Taliesin, I have a very clear line. I will spoil myself on mechanics and game systems. I do not go out of my way to spoil stories for me. I'm not raid testing. I will never go raid test. So what point is there in spoiling for myself the identity of raid bosses?
Okay, fair, I guess. But A, remind me never to be in a raid group with you. And B...
No. Once the raid is out, I'm going to go watch guides. Okay. I'm going to educate myself. But if we're in alpha or beta, I have zero interest. And I frankly don't see the value.
Did you not watch the, like, what's next panel at BlizzCon or, like, the Shadowlands deep dive? Because they said it in that.
Yeah, I do. I just don't always retain that information because it's not relevant information.
Who was the boss of the first? You didn't retain that information. You were all like, "Oh, I love the Vampire Covenant. I love those Venthyr guys. They're really cool." And when someone came on, when Ian came on and was like, "Okay, so, so the first, I'm glad you like the bitey vampire boys."
We're having two different conversations. You're having a conversation with me about
like, and when he started talking about Revendreth, and you were like, "Oh, that's the ones I really like. Maybe I'll listen to this bit." And he was like, "And the first raid's going to be in Revendreth." And also, the leader of the Covenant is the boss of the first raid. And you just went, "Oh, I don't know what he said there. I was looking at my phone." What did he say? Don't tell me if it's a spoiler. I won't need to know about that in the instance later on. Don't worry.
Well, Scott doesn't retain this information either, so it's totally fine. We're both on the same level of not retaining this information. I'm more interested in how I'm going to be playing the game day to day. That's where I focus intently on pre-knowledge of expansions. Like even before I was doing more regular WoW content, that's always kind of been the case. Like I want to know like how the shit do I grind the new thing I need to grind for the new expansion? Like that's kind of where my brain goes. And so like this kind of stuff, especially if it's new characters, like I just don't remember it. Like it's just not a thing that lives in my brain. If it's an existing character, if they were like, "Yeah, we're going to Argus," like I'm like, I know what Argus is. I knew what it was before this. They say we're going there. I retain that. But if they're like, Sire Vampire asshole is going to be the boss of this raid, I'm like, I don't know who this guy is.
You still don't know his name. You've watched the cinematic now. You still don't know it.
No, I know it's Denathrius. I was just trying to be funny.
Fine.
But
I didn't know you were trying to be funny. Can you make it more obvious next time? Can you put something on the screen?
to Manny in the chat room who I have raided with says, "I've raided with Garrett. He kills bosses, gets loot, and then takes off his blindfold." See, I'm just that good at getting carried.
Tell me when it's dead. I'll stop hitting the
Tell
button.
me when he's dead. Boy, I was so surprised fighting Gul'dan at the end there. But again, no, that's just where I draw the line. But we're having two different arguments here. You're yelling at me for just not remembering stuff that Ian says at BlizzCon. I'm yelling at you because even if I did retain that information, I wouldn't want to consider it in my reaction to something like this, because this should stand on its own, because for a lot of people watching it, it does, because they haven't played the beta, they haven't played the alpha, they didn't go to BlizzCon.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's good. That's very interesting then. In that case, from your point of view, like, as someone who, for some unknown fucking reason, doesn't know that Nathrius is the leader is the boss of the first raid, from your point of view, professional WoW commentator, like, who somehow didn't know this information, like, genuinely, when you watch that cinematic, and this is interesting. I'm not even taking the Mickey anymore. Like, do you come away from that cinematic thinking to yourself, maybe Sire Denathrius has got a hand in this drought that everyone's talking about, because he doesn't seem like a very good guy?
You're going to absolutely lose your mind, but no, I don't. I think I honestly, now I knew that going in because I do a podcast with you where you consider things far past the very specific thing we're talking about, but I don't. And, and so I definitely came away with, oh, he is obviously a baddie within minutes. It's like, oh, this dude is clearly a villain. But I think you could easily have come away with this, and this is me more playing foil than actually believing this, but I think you could have come away with this if you knew nothing else about Shadowlands, going, oh, he's also affected by the drought, and he's just trying to make himself comfortable rather than doing it for the good of the realm. And I think you could have come away with thinking that that's where this begins and ends.
I think that's very fair. Yeah, totally. Okay, no, I think that's a fair, which is a shame because I really wanted to disagree with you, and so I could do a really cool joke that I thought of as you were saying that, because I can multitask, and where I said, Garrett, that's not playing a foil, that's chewing foil. It's so stupid. That's the joke I wanted to make, but unfortunately, what you said wasn't that stupid and actually made a lot of sense. So I found a way to get the joke out there anyway.
And I would like to end all of that with, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
No. We end it when I say so. I got a lot to say about this.
No, I have a cap on that. I just want to cap that, like my thoughts there with, I don't think it's a bad thing if folks came away with that. No, because it's fine. It's fine if you go.
What you said is very fair, and you're right. You could absolutely come away from it just thinking, oh, wow, here's another zone that is affected by the drought, but look how differently the leaders of this zone are handling it to the leaders of Ardenweald that we just saw last cinematic, who are taking a much different approach. That's what you could easily say, isn't it? I totally agree with that. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I would argue that most people watching would have some kind of context to who Denathrius is and like his wider story, and that the cinematic is within its rights to, on some level, assume that knowledge and play off it, which I think it does really, really well. But here's the thing: I think, like, even if that is the only thing you take from it, that Denathrius is a bad guy. Look how he treats his people. That's not very nice, is it? Look at him living in a lap of luxury, and siphoning off the poor and the working class and the labor and making them live with nothing, while all the resources travel upwards and a select few live in absolute luxury whilst not doing any work. How unlike our own world. How unlike real life. What a bad place Revendreth is, and that, even if that was all you took from it, I think that sets up the zone really nicely. And you think, I agree. I can't wait to get to that zone and put that right. I wonder if I'll get the chance to put it right. But with the assumption that that you will fight him, that's kind of reinforced even more. But even if that was the only thing you took from it, I still think that's a valid reason to have the cinematic. And there's a lot of the way they chose to present it with the almost like the public service announcement, right? It was now in my head, and I've said this before, he's dictating that speech to a scribe. Okay, so in my head, again, it's very Robin Hood. They're going to kind of write out that decree on many different scrolls, like wanted posters in Robin Hood, and they're going to go and nail it to the very gothic walls all around Revendreth for the populace, for the working poor to go and see. And the working poor will kind of like look at these posters like, oh no, we have to, oh no, this is so bad. And like,
and then one of them pulls it down, and then some goon comes and drags them away.
Definitely. And in my head, that's how that message gets out. But by having him dictate it, it's really nice as well, because it also gives you that dystopian future vibe of like Big Brother, like making the announcement over the tannoy with all the double talk and the double think and things like that. And that was like incredibly satisfying to me, because that just is, like I say, as fiction goes. We spent a lot of the pre-show today talking about my love of Shadowrun. Like that's very up my street and very up my alley, and I really like it. And I don't know, maybe it just spoke to me in ways. And okay, so also I've been in trouble. I got in trouble from a lot of people in my video about Revendreth, because they assumed I was being like political, okay, about it.
Oh, because there's nothing political in this short. I mean, I watched this short, Taliesin, and I think to myself, what a delightfully politically agnostic piece of fiction here.
So in fairness, like, it is supposed to be representative of like just any authoritarian kind of regime, okay? And that's fine. So like, I'm sure if Evitel's parents were to watch that cinematic, coming from like, communist Poland like they did, they might think to themselves, that was a bit like communist Poland where we lived, but for me as a British person, and especially having Sire Denathrius be like, there was that one line where it all started to get a little bit real, and it all started to get a little bit on the nose for me. And that line was where he said, you know, rich and poor alike must all make sacrifices. Because, you know, there's no reason anyone who isn't British would know or even care about this. But, you know, for the last 10 years in Britain, we've had a government who has followed an austerity policy to deal with the worldwide financial crash, where they've cut public services, they've cut money going to the needy, basically, and given tax breaks and government help to big business and things like that. Because that's how they saw was the best way to get out of the recession that was caused by the financial crash. It turned out that wasn't true. Other countries that did it differently came out of the recession a lot quicker. We arguably never did. And like the tagline for that austerity policy was, "We are all in this together," which, if you're British and you hear Syed and Athris say rich and poor alike must all make sacrifices, whilst at the same time see the poor making lots of sacrifices and the rich not, then it's like, it's literally impossible not to think of what's been happening in this country for the last 10 years. It's like if Syed and Athris had come on screen and said, "I'm going to build a big fence on the border and also lock her up. Like, it would be impossible for you not to think of your government, right? Like,
yes,
you wouldn't be able to not think of your government in that situation. And it's the same if you're British and you watch this, because it's so reminiscent. And it's so kind of like, the language is almost the same and the same things are happening. Like, you know, like in the last 10 years, we had child poverty reach levels that it hadn't been at since World War II.
Taliesin, we clearly need to keep the Maldraxxi out of Revendreth.
Yeah.
You just have to erect a wall.
But like, so it's just, so for me, I thought of it as, you know, it clearly had relevance to a real life situation that I am, you know, very close to and familiar with. So obviously I kind of talked about it in those terms. Whereas for other people, yeah, I mean, God, if you're living in like North Korea or something, you don't see that and go, "Oh, that's a bit like the British government."
Well, Taliesin, I think if you're in North Korea, if you're in North Korea, I just don't think you see that because everything is so sensitive.
I think you'd be surprised. Life finds a way, mate. Life finds a way.
Doing a bit.
Yeah.
But, you know, Talia, I mean, that makes sense because you clearly try to shoehorn politics in wherever you can, where they clearly don't exist, because, you know, you're just one of those people that ruin things like Star Wars and try to politicize things like the Empire. Or like, how do you go and read or watch something like Watchmen and find political commentary where there is none?
I hate it when they put politics into Watchmen.
Yeah, you're just the worst, Taliesin. I mean, how dare you?
Disgusting. I hate it when at the end of the Watchmen comic, like the quite conservative guy sends his diary to an explicitly like right-wing newspaper, and then later on in the story, like all the right-wing like white supremacists like that guy. It's so weird. It's putting politics in my Watchmen.
I think the most controversial thing you may have said there was just considering the follow-up HBO series Hardcore Canon, and everyone is on board with that.
No, I'm talking about the reaction to that HBO series.
I know.
Yeah. How dare they remind us that Tulsa happened? How dare they? How dare they remind us that a real life event happened? Boo, Watchmen, boo.
It's great. That's great.
1984 is just a sad story.
I will now be announcing my my weekly reset companion show in the style of the Colbert Report. It's going to be wonderful.
No, exactly. So, but the thing is, right? I mean, yeah, there's clearly, even if you don't want to read it as a criticism of any political system, and that's perfectly fair enough. Why you don't have to, like, it's, I mean, there's clearly some jabs at the idea of you know, like the establishment. You could read it as a criticism on hereditary power. You could read it as a criticism on like for a start, something I say in my Revendreth video, and this is something that genuinely confuses me. He says rich and poor alike, and those two things clearly exist in Revendreth. Like, how come there's a rich and poor in Revendreth at all?
It's a little weird, right? That there's even
it's a little bit odd.
They have money. They have an economy. Like, this is the afterlife. Like we've seen a lot of a lot of depictions of hell in fiction. I'm struggling to think of one where it's like, you have to go to the grocery store and can't afford bread. Like, it's like, wait, I'm sorry. What now?
It's really odd.
I mean, it kind of tees up anima as their currency, right? Like,
say again?
It kind of tees up anima as their currency, as their like economy, as their
maybe.
I mean, it tees it up as their health, right? Because those who are having to give are the ones suffering, and the ones receiving are the ones that are prospering. So, in what they show us in this one little vignette, that's what we have to go off of. Like, I look at this and say, oh, it's strange that they have a class system and a sense of economy and wealth, but that's weird. But as I understand it from watching this, it is all derived from anima.
I guess so, or it could be just because that's the thing that's scarce, right? Like, sort of, I guess
like,
so.
like day to day here, let's just keep relating it to things in the real world. Like here in Florida, day to day, we don't really think of gas, but the second a hurricane comes through, gas becomes an extremely scarce commodity.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, and well, the thing is, like, no one is supposed to have any more anima than anyone else. Like the anima kind of is the thing that makes you exist in the Shadowlands, right? And that's why when the poor are asked to give of their anima, like it's literally their lifeblood, which is why it's so easy to draw a comparison to capitalism, because that is that's a way that people talk about capitalism a lot, and like the way that labor is used in capitalism. So like that, again, that's just an obvious comparison to make, but like it's literally their being. It's not like they're not donating food, they're donating their essence, to keep the others alive. And so the anima is something that is supposed to exist, and it arrives with souls arriving in the zone. And we see someone who we haven't talked about in this podcast at all yet, Garrosh Scream, being used as like a battery and having like constant supplies of anima drawn out of him.
Or a dairy cow, which is apparently what he's been reduced to, a dairy cow.
Yeah, but
just
the thing is,
milk the Garrosh, Taliesin.
But the suggestion is, going back to the rich and poor thing, the suggestion is that, rich and poor existed before the anima drought. So it's not even a case of like, those who have more anima are the rich ones, those who have like less anima are the poor ones. Because like even when anima was like this abstract concept that everyone just had because it was in the zone, and it always was, rich and poor presumably still existed then in Revendreth. And it's like, we see hierarchies in the other covenants. Like the Winter Queen is clearly the leader of Ardenweald. Like the Arbiter is clearly the leader of Bastion, and she has her like council, and there are clear hierarchies there. But there's no suggestion that anyone like owns more than anyone else.
Yeah, they were like hierarchies in what we think of as like a more traditional afterlife sense of like there are just beings, like there is a god and there are angels and that kind of thing, not that are more essentially fantasy or otherworldly, and not so much like economically motivated.
Yeah, it's just like incredibly different, and it just makes me wonder. And I'm sure Blizzard don't have an answer, because why would they? But like, it just makes me wonder where that came from, which is interesting.
Yeah, and yet really plays into. I mean, it also it. We've seen stuff like this before, especially with like elf society in World of Warcraft fiction. Like it's not an alien concept within Warcraft. It just seems odd in framed in the afterlife.
Yeah. But
also, again, not a bad thing.
And to Garrosh Hellscream screaming in hell as he is.
It's just so metal. It's wonderful. Just
what's the deal with that then? What's going on there, Garrett? Explain it. What's happening to Garrosh Hellscream?
Well, you know what? Here's another thing I liked that kind of ties this in all the way back to the first short we got in Bastion, which is this idea of challenging a Warcraft fan's conception of like justice, of what certain characters in Warcraft fiction deserve.
Interesting.
Because
which you could argue is a similar thing that they did in the Bastion.
That's exactly what I'm tying it into. Because in this is where I found it. This is where I liked the short the most. This is where I found it the most interesting, is the way it echoed the other cinematics, either echoed or kind of contrasted them, because I think Denathrius has a really interesting contrast to nerd out about with the Winter Queen. And I think there's a cool echo here with what's happening with Garrosh and what happened to Arthas at the end of the Bastion Shore, because we all know Arthas, the greatest baddie, most famous baddie in the history of Warcraft, one of the most famous baddies in the history of video games, right? He's a bastard. Deserves the worst fate on Earth. But as you pointed out, feels like you're kind of playing into the jailer's hand by just chucking his soul into the maw. Like, we have a vague enough understanding at the end of the Bastion cinematic that that's not the way that the Shadowlands works. You're supposed to be sorted. You're supposed to at least have one more chance, basically. It's kind of hinted at. Not so overtly stated, but hinted at. And then you get here, and it's Garrosh. Maybe the second worst baddie, despite his copy-pasted clone of Sylvanas now. Sorry, had to get that jab in there. Clearly, it just deserves the worst, right? Does he deserve this? Does he? Does he deserve just to be chained in it? I mean, probably, honestly, yes. I think he probably does. But it's hard. Like, it calls into question the whole system. Like this short. This short calls into question like all of Revendreth. Because like, and this is where it gets in, again. I think it gets interesting because I started thinking to myself, well, has it always been like this? Has the Nathrius what was it like when there wasn't a drought? Like when anima was just flowing, like, and you can just get as much of it as you wanted. Like, what was punishment? What did the redemption process even look like in Revendreth before this point in time? Before essentially we show up, because we show up and have to deal with the drought in all of the realms, right? So, like, were they still chaining Garrosh up and torturing him? But I start to think about, like, very practical implications, and not that I like to think about torture, but, like, were they still doing that? Like, what the hell was it like before this? And
the suggestion when he talks about our methods or our rituals are effective, he says, and suggests that has always been the way that they kind of treat souls and try and encourage their redemption. So it would suggest that has always been their approach. Maybe they make more of a point of drawing out anima now that there is a drought. But here's a question. How long has Garrosh been there? Because Garrosh died on alternate Draenor, which is like established to have been like 30 years ago in our time.
Yeah. And time works differently in the Shadowlands, right? Like
of course.
As vaguely as we understand it, it seems like more time seems to go by in the Shadowlands than it does in the mortal realms.
Well, in that case, he's been there even longer. But the point is, the point is that he canonically was there before Arthas was put into the Maw, like long before this drought ever started. So, I mean, you know, if he, because something that BFA established, which no one was really that sure about before, is that alternate Draenor is literally 30 years behind us. You know, we don't just travel to a different dimension in World of Draenor. We actually also go back in time. It's not like alternate Draenor is parallel to us, but happens to be at a point 30 years in the past. Like, it literally was 30 years back on the timeline as well that we went when we traveled. Because when we go back to the Magar Orc scenario in BFA, it's present time, and WoD was 30 years ago.
Thank you for reminding me that I really can't stand WoD, and it just further confuses the narrative and drives me bananas.
So BFA did do some work to actually clarify what happened in WoD, and it's established that we also went back in time for WoD as well, which just makes it even more stupid.
Yes.
And like, not actually what was suggested before WoD at all.
Boy, that was the subtlest butterfly effect we've ever seen. So little changed after we went back and really disrupted major historical events 30 years in the past.
I hate the whole concept of that. Anyway, as well, you know. So, 35, 40 years ago even, right? Yeah, absolutely. So the fact is, out of all of the characters that we've seen that we recognize in those cinematics, Garrosh has been there the longest. Then Drakar, and then Arthas.
Well, Uther.
Then Uther, then Arthas.
Yeah, so Garrosh the longest, Draka's second most longest, Uther before that, followed by Arthas, of the characters we've seen so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Ursok. So,
Oh, right. Or something. Yeah, sorry about that.
First off, super new, and
Yeah.
also not there anymore.
Yeah, like extra dead.
He's just Soylent now. He's just Soylent.
Anima is people.
Yeah, yeah. And
It is quite
people
literally people.
Yeah, Garrosh and Drakkar would have been there for very similar amounts of time, but Garrosh would have been there marginally longer. Yeah,
slightly. Because the events of WoD definitely wouldn't have changed the opening of the Dark Portal and the march.
So WoD happens around the time of Warcraft 1, and Drakkar died in Warcraft 2, I think, like around that sort of time. So there is like a whole different game in between them. Yeah, but they are like there's not much time in the world between them. So, but they're similar amounts of time. But Garrosh no longer.
Interesting implications for sure.
Mm-hmm. And so he's been there, like, and it's what you say about how broken the system is. That's a good point, because you've got a situation in Revendreth where, their job is to either help people find redemption or to send them to the Maw. But you've got a situation where it's kind of in their interests to do neither. Because if you have like powerful souls like Garrosh, who you can just use as a big battery, like it's in your interest to not redeem them and to not send them to the Maw, but just to keep them chained up with some vampire dudes sucking the anima out, which is exactly what we see. And the other question would be, what is it about Garrosh that allows him to be used in that way, Garrett? Like, that's not possible. Like, without spoilers, it's not possible for every soul to be kind of milked like that. So why is it possible for Garrosh?
Well, I mean, it seems to suggest that the more evil you are, the more anima you have within you. Is anima equal to your the corruption of your soul?
It's like so it's funny because Sidenathris says that these are the most violent and wicked souls, which you could definitely apply to Garrosh. But he also makes a big deal of calling them hubris-ridden and prideful. Hubristic, I think he says, and prideful.
Yeah, but I mean, at a very basic level, I think you could attribute those traits to the most evil. Like they're
and also here's the thing:
the same.
You could attribute pride and hubris to those souls that we see in Revendreth who have been redeemed and have then become Venthyr. There's still a lot of prideful behavior among the Venthyr in Revendreth, and those are souls who were sent to like Revendreth and then redeemed, and then they became Venthyr to help out and didn't go to the Maw. But they still have pride. So being redeemed doesn't rid you of your pride, because we see redeemed souls in Revendreth who have that pride. So yeah, it could be the pride, the unending, never-ending pride of Garrosh that allows him to be milked in that way. But ridding him of his pride would not redeem him, because we see redeemed souls who still have pride. So it's not enough to get sent to the Maw just because you have a whole bunch of pride, and they don't need to get rid of that before they redeem you. So in my mind, it might be something else. So I don't know, but I have no answers. I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
He also, like, I don't know the technical term, but kind of like pseudo merged with an old god, like at one point. Yeah,
that could well be it.
Like, who knows how that affects.
We also know that Garrosh is not the only one who is in that situation in Revendreth. We know because Sidenathri says our old workhorses plural, which suggests that there are other people in the exact same place. Yeah,
which calls into question, like, how specific is it to what happened to Garrosh, kind of a thing, right?
Yeah. So I'd really love to know. And there could be, don't forget that the people who are in Revendreth aren't limited in any way to people from Azeroth. There could be people who went through very similar experiences to Garrosh who maybe merged with a Shah of Pride on their own world and stuff like that. And like, it could literally be that. There are night warriors from other planets. Maybe there are people that consumed the heart of an old god on other planets as well, and who took in the Shire of Pride into their very being. I mean, it's possible. It's more than possible. In an infinite universe, it's actually guaranteed that there'll be someone who is exactly like Garrosh on a different planet. It's impossible that there wouldn't be in an infinite universe, which is what's so brilliant about infinite universes. There would definitely be there would definitely be a planet where there was a Shire of Pride, and there would definitely be someone who consumed that Shire of Pride or teamed up with them or something. So it's definitely a possibility that it's just people like Garrosh. But I don't know. I'd be interested to see.
Yeah, me too. It's interesting. I mean, from like a gameplay mechanic, they kind of tee up anima as a power source, so it also kind of drills home how dangerous it is that we're just chucking souls into the maw directly and giving the jailer all of them. Not even just Arthuses, who, if Garrosh is any indication, probably a pretty strong source of anima, but just anyone, even the good souls.
I like to think that it's just because he's so badass that you can just
Garrosh.
milk that boy over and over.
I like to think that he was such a right bastard that it's a little satisfying to see him reduced to a dairy cow. Just a little, satisfying.
Here's another question. Now that we've established that Garrosh is there, do you think that we will see him again in Shadowlands?
Sure would make a lot of sense, right? They've literally shown him to us in a short, gonna happen. And he didn't. Yeah. We didn't see him fully consumed within the short as we did with, or as we more or less did in Ardenweald with Ursoc, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see Ursoc in Ardenweald. At the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if we did I don't know, because I didn't quest through Ardenweald on the alpha.
Here's my real question. Assuming that we will see him in Shadowlands, is there a Garrosh redemption coming up? What's going to happen to Garrosh in Shadowlands?
You remember when we started this 4-part podcast series and I said I wouldn't be against an Arthas redemption as long as it was done right, and I'm usually open to really any direction you want to take a story as long as you pull some interesting story threads. I'm pretty dead set against the Garrosh redemption. I hate him so much. Garrosh Arthas is one of those villains that's cool to like. It's like Darth Vader, the kind of thing you want to be for Halloween. Garrosh, I just hate him. There's no redeeming quality of Garrosh. He's just a right bastard.
So if we were to come across Garrosh in Shadowlands, you'd either want him to stay where he is, getting milked, or get sent to the Maw, or we kill him. You wouldn't want him to find redemption and become a Venthyr or something like that. Or go to Maldraxxus or something.
I would like him to just be...
Earlier, but you don't have to become a Venthyr if you get redeemed. You either become a Venthyr to help out in Revendreth, or you get sent to a covenant more fitting for your newly redeemed soul. So you would get sent. It's kind of like reincarnation, how you kind of go up steps if you're a good soul. If you're a fly and you're a very good fly and you lead a very good fly life, you might be reborn as an otter. And then if you're a very
that's a pretty big
otter,
jump. That's a pretty big jump. Maybe you need to.
And you live a very good life, then you might be reborn as a human. If you're a bad otter and you lead a bad otter life, an evil otter life, you might be reborn as a YouTuber.
Nicely done. Well done. On brand.
Thank you.
I'm hoping that they basically just retread the original Death Knight starting quest where you equip 2 hot pikes and torture people into telling you information, but we get to use it on Garrosh. That's my hope for our interaction with Garrosh. Except this time, I hope they just give you a steel boot to put on and kick him in the crotch. That'd be great. That would be great. By the end, they were so effective with Garrosh. By the end, I was just you are the worst.
It wasn't just that he was the worst. It was that he had the gall to have a raid that lasted a year.
That too, yeah. He was just. There's so much of the Garrosh character. Mini Garrosh podcast here. There's so much of I just hate him. He's just the absolute pits. Not only is he basically Orc Hitler by the end of it, like I remember kind of his rise to war chief, and he's like goes and makes shoulders from a kill he had no part in. Like he's just standing on the shoulders of his dead father, and I just couldn't stand him. Like the second I remember walking into the throne room and seeing that the tusks had been cut off the Manaroth skull. I'm just like, oh, you bastard. You didn't earn those.
Okay, so and like I mean I find it unlikely that Garrosh will get redeemed. There is a redemption story already for a character we know in Revendreth, which I won't talk about, but you could probably guess who.
Mm-hmm.
So like I find it unlikely there would be two, which leads me to believe that if we do come across Garrosh, and it would almost be weird not to now. I agree. Now that he's been in the cinematic, although in many ways I would actually like it if that's all we ever saw of him was in the cinematic. Like that would be funny to me. But right now he's Chekhov's war chief, as someone said in the chat. You know, like he's hanging over the mantelpiece in Act 1, and you know that he's going to have to get used in Act 2 or 3. Like that's how it works, right? So I still think it would be awesome if he was, and I know you don't know who the final boss of Castle Nathria is yet, but I think it'd be awesome if he was part of the mythic only phase in the final boss of Castle Nathria.
Oh, it was like a secret boss or something?
Yeah. Well, as in, okay, so spoilers for Castle Nathria, right? The raid. The final fight is against Cider Nathrius. And it's a bit like Black Hand in that the fight takes place over multiple floors. You like fall through floors as the fight goes on. And then you're fighting on a different floor. And then you fall through another floor. You're fighting on a different floor. Wouldn't it be cool if it turns out that tower that you're fighting in is the tower that Garrosh is being kept in? So for the Mythic Only phase, you drop through another floor and you're in the room that we see Garrosh in that cinematic. And he's all chained up. And and Denathrius is like, I will let you free if you defeat these people, Garrosh. And he's like, okay, fine. And so he's like an extra ad that you have to fight for a little bit. And like at the very end of the fight, maybe he turns around and like smashes Denathrius and steals it. But then you kill him. That
would be rad. You kill someone who's already dead. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's Garrosh.
Still looking for clarification on what happens to you when you die in the Shadowlands.
I know. I feel like that would be cool because it's not a redemption, but he does something cool. So if you like the character, you're like, oh, Garrosh did something cool, but then you kill him. So basically everyone's happy.
I think Garrosh is an effective villain. I don't like the character. It's very different. It's like again, it's like the Vader thing. Like I like Vader. I think Vader's a cool villain. I had shirts of him when I was a kid. I had costumes. I had toys. I don't like Garrosh. He's just so weird. I think it'd be cool if, because I am aware of the redemption quest you're alluding to. I would think it'd be cool if there was another quest line with Garrosh, but it's like a failed redemption. You're like, oh, we're redeeming Garrosh, and at the end he just reminds you that he's a total garbage boy and cannot be redeemed.
Now, I don't know if you remember this because we never talk about it, but in WoD, the baddie of WoD was set up to be Grommash Hellscream, right? He was the leader.
Yeah. And you really like where that ended up, right? You found it extremely satisfying from a story aspect, and it's not something that is the single greatest disappointment in the history of you playing World of Warcraft?
He was the main baddie of WoD, and we were actually told at one point that he was going to be the final boss of WoD. He did all bad stuff, and we stopped him doing some bad stuff, but he still did a load of bad stuff. And then he had no intention of stopping doing the bad stuff, but he was then captured by the Legion. And then, because we had to fight the Legion, in the course of that, we rescued him, and then we were friends. Even though he tried to kill everyone and had no intention of stopping doing that before he was rescued by the Legion, before he was kidnapped by the Legion, we rescued him, and then suddenly he was on our side, and we were okay with that. And so we've established that that's how it works, right, in WoW. So if we were to rescue Garrosh from Revendreth, he'd be on our side, and we'd be fine with that. It would be the exact same as the Grommash situation. If we, in the course of the Revendreth raid, went through Garrosh's cell and rescued him, and everyone was just fine with that, I mean, that would be literally what happens in WoD.
So I know you get to talk to some of the folks that have a hand in the story of World of Warcraft. Have any of them you know, at you know, maybe last year's BlizzCon, they're like happy to see you, and the first thing they say is like, "Would you fucking get off this already?"
No, none of them watch this podcast.
And because you never mention it in any of your other content.
I just think it's so dumb. And also, no, I don't care. I don't care if like I'm friendly with people that make this game. I reserve the right to shit on WoD as much as I want. And I will.
Fair.
And I think most people would be okay with that. And look, I can still recognize the things that were good about WoD, and like all of the making and all of the designing was good about WoD. It was just like there was just no content. And also the thing about Grom, which sucks.
Chat room says shitting on WoD is the God-given right of every WoW player.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Is the old God-given right of every WoW player. Come on, brand it up. Brand it up, Aaron Dye.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I can't see that happening with Garrosh. I like your idea of maybe us rescuing Garrosh and like giving him a shot at redemption and him failing and getting some.
I will say I'm drawing on some of my favorite animated Star Wars arcs because I am rewatching Rebels at the moment. And spoiler alert for Rebels, a show that has been finished for half a decade now. They bring back Darth Maul, and they kind of hint at like, ooh,
he's a mechanome.
He may be a good guy now. He is a mechanome. You're right. He's a mechanome in Clone Wars as well. But in Rebels, he comes back, and you're like, oh, maybe he's redeemed. And then an episode later reminds you that he's a total trash garbage man, and nothing has changed. And that's kind of how I would like to see them play with Garrosh, because I just don't find Garrosh likable at all. And I think Clone Wars and Rebels made Maul fun in kind of showing that he had a rough go of it.
There's a lot of fun to be had in, irrespective of whether there's an understandable reason why a baddie is bad. I think like all baddies kind of need an understandable reason to be bad. I think we'll get that with the Jailer. We certainly have that with Sylvanas and Arthas. I think you arguably have that with Garrosh as well. But there is like a lot of enjoyment to be had out of whatever the reason and how understandable that might be, someone just being irredeemably bad. Just because someone's sympathetic doesn't make them redeemable. Right. And like, I enjoy Sylvanas being flat out evil as much as I can sympathize with how she got there. Like I enjoy that with Garrosh as well. Like there's a lot of enjoyment to be had there, and I'd like to see them. I want to see them do that with Sylvanas in Shadowlands.
I think that's my difference between the two is like I never sympathized with Garrosh in the first place. Like I kind of thought he was starting at a pretty unsympathetic place.
He was always a bit of a dick.
Exactly. And whereas I think Sylvanas starts from the most sympathetic place, and that's why I think I'm so disappointed that they went the mustache twirly route with her that they did. And I don't think I've thought about that until this exact moment, so thank you for that breakthrough, Taliesin.
Isn't that how tragedy works, though? Like, I mean, a tragedy, it's not enough that bad things happen to you, right? For a tragedy to really be a tragedy, part of your downfall has to be of your own making. Like that's the definition of a tragedy. So like in theatrical and literature terms, at least, probably not how we'd use the word in everyday life. Like something horrible happens to someone, you go, well, that's a tragedy. But in the actual literal meaning of the word, like for a tragedy to be a tragedy, part of it has to be your fault.
Well, if Grom is your rosebud, and World of Warcraft critique, Sylvanas is mine. So I guess we're back at it to where I can't help but look at the decision to burn Teldrassil as one of the biggest single letdowns in Warcraft lore, because it just to me felt like she was just like, I feel like burning it.
I mean, I cannot agree with you on that at all. I'm really sorry. I just can't.
They tinted at it for like months. They're just like, why did she burn it? Why did she burn it, Taliesin? And in the pre-patch, we will reveal to you, she just kind of felt like it. Some no-name elf you don't know said something that kind of mildly irritated her. And like a Karen throwing a milkshake through the McDonald's drive-through window, she just decided to burn an entire people.
Yeah, and like sometimes, not everything has a nice, neat explanation like you want it to, Garrett. Sometimes shit just happens.
Yeah, I don't like my characters that seem to be master strategists and manipulators, just randomly having an emotional fit and burning things. Or if they're going to, I'd like it to be better setup than, oh, I'm mildly inconvenienced by the words you spoke.
I feel like that's not the story that Warbringers tells.
I feel like that's exactly the story that Warbringers tells.
I don't want to talk about it now. I feel like the Burning of Teldrassil is an amazing moment in WoW history. I feel like it was incredible to live through it. I feel like it was done really well in game, apart from the Warbringers. Like, and when I say apart from, I mean like separate from the Warbringers. And like personally, the Warbringers was enough for me. But I can see why some people don't. It's fine. I don't even disagree with them. I just feel differently from them.
I'm with you on everything in the game itself. I thought the way it played out in game was awesome. And I think it has really interesting story implications for everyone except Sylvanas. I just didn't think it made her a more interesting villain.
Just to use human history as an example, because that's, the only history I really know. Like war is littered with just spite. Like war is littered with just spiteful massacres and killings and burnings and destroyings and like, the Romans knew that kind of not massacring people was often the best way to win a war and have peace in the aftermath of a war. But throughout history, we see like people being spiteful and great leaders being spiteful and committing atrocities in the moment, just like that. Like, I mean, it's something that happens in war, unfortunately, and it might not play well in your ideal kind of, fantasy narrative, but to deny that it's realistic, I feel is naive.
I think I don't think I relate realistic to quality writing.
Okay, fine. But like, if something's realistic, I would say it's an inaccurate criticism to say that it doesn't make sense to a character. Because like, if other characters in similar positions throughout history have acted in the same way, then I don't know. I kind of feel like, isn't that saying more about, war than, isn't it saying something that like a character does maybe act in a way that you wouldn't expect of them in a war situation? Isn't that like more comment on war than it is on the character?
Not in the character piece. It shouldn't be, I guess. I don't know.
You can't just decide that like a character can ascend and like transcend the situations that they're put in. Like if they're put in a situation that is established to change people and then they change, I mean, you might not like it, but you're not really supposed to, are you?
No, but you're not supposed to like Garrosh's rise. You're not supposed to like Arthas's turn, but I do.
Okay.
Like, it's not the action that bothers me, it's the motivation. And it just feels like you could have done anything. You could have made anything the motivating factor, and they teased the shit out of it. And it just ended up kind of being a throwaway.
In fairness, all of the kind of theories that were flying around at the time were rubbish as well.
I disagree. I think you could have thrown a dart.
What was the theory that you liked that would have made it better?
Oh, I don't really care. I think that you could have thrown a dart at a fan theory and come up with something more interesting than what is in that Warbringers.
Really? That she was being controlled by the old gods or something? Don't you think that's like super lame? Don't you think that takes responsibility like off the act of war? Like you are making an expansion about war, and like your main message is how like people do horrible things in war. And like you go, but this person didn't. She was controlled by the old gods. Everyone's fine. It would be like, I don't know, man. I feel like people being controlled by forces is such a cop-out. And I feel like, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not defending that one. I'm not
trying to make Sylvanas look bad or something
that
like that.
That would have been 100% more interesting.
No, that is
no, I disagree with you.
You can't sit here going, it was bad writing, and then say, I tell you what would have been good writing. I tell you what would have been good writing is if Gen Greymane, who's in charge of Gilneas, are people who famously owe a lot to the Night Elves, and he's been established as really fucking loving the Night Elves, like as long as we've had Gen Greymane in game, wouldn't? Yeah. Well, what would be better, right? What would be better and much more.
Wait, are you saying that Gen couldn't possibly? Wait, hold. I'm gonna pause you. So you're saying Taliesin. Let me make sure I understand you right. That Gen Greymane is incapable of a certain action because of past atrocities committed against him.
No. What I'm saying is, if you're saying it
sounds like you're saying.
No, because I'm not the one that's complaining about Sylvanas. You are. So I'm applying your logic to this, not my own. This is what I'm doing. This is not my logic. This is your logic as you've applied it to Sylvanas, and now I'm applying it to Gen. Like you know, and like. I mean, that would have been way more out of character for someone to like go against the people who saved them and who he loves and who his wife loves and who he owes his life and his people's life to burn down them and genocide them to make Sylvanas, who you're already at war with, look bad is outrageously shit writing. It's like, oh, we're at war with this person, but I don't think we're enough at war with them. I need to make her look bad. It's like, we're already at war. We're already like rallying our forces. We will already kill her if we find her, but I need to make her look worse. I need to make her look bad, so I'll burn all the people I like. And you're seriously telling me that that's more believable and more satisfying than a military leader killing some people out of spite, something that you know happens all the time?
I am legitimately telling you that, yes. Yes, I'm legitimately telling you that.
They got their own minds. You know, it's like I need to make this military leader who we're already at war with look worse. Why? So we're more at war with them.
And just please don't get up at BlizzCon and ask us why, and then tease it for months on end. Because the answer is she felt like it.
You're also forgetting we were told that Sylvanas wouldn't burn the tree. No, we weren't. Someone said in the chat, but that's
I don't think that we were told that. No, we were told explicitly that she burns it, and then led to believe that it was an interesting reason why.
Anyway, yeah, it's weird. Anyway, that I'm glad that very relevant thing to Revendreth.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Great part. So, do we need to do a Sylvanas episode now, or can we just count that it?
Okay, but for me, okay, so this is the thing. Someone's bringing up in chat, that's what makes Garrosh a satisfying villain, is because his decisions are his own. And I completely agree with that. It goes back to what I was saying about there being a satisfaction in just someone doing evil stuff, because whether they have a good reason to or not, you know, that's just as a viewer, that's fun. It's also something that just happens. And like, that's why it's more satisfying to me that Sylvanas wasn't corrupted by the old gods and she wasn't being mind controlled or controlled. I really hope that turns out to be the case. Like, I want her to have sided with the jailer, because she was like, okay, she might have been fooled, but her decisions are her own. Okay, so she might have been tricked, but she's not corrupted. She's not mind controlled.
Oh, so she's not Garrosh 2.0. She's Arthas 2.0.
I don't want, you know, well, I mean, it's true that Arthas was kind of corrupted and mind controlled to a certain extent, but also he made the decisions that led him there, which is important too. Like, it's not just like someone gets mind controlled and then they are turned and they're a baddie now. Like, Arthas took many steps down the road that of his own accord and like through the decisions that he made, which is why you can legitimately call it a tragedy. Like, same with Garrosh, same with Sylvanas, I believe. Like, and I like tragic villains who are also really bad and deserve to be killed. They're cool.
Yeah. This is other parts that go into this, like proximity to other tragic villains that are just evil and need to be killed. But
yeah, I mean, you could argue that you know, Deathwing is kind of not in that category because he really was like corrupted, you know, and like would have been a good person were it not for that. So it's
right.
It's it's not a tragedy in the same way, and it's not as satisfying, I would argue, either. But in many ways, it's sadder because you have to take out someone who maybe wouldn't have chosen to do all those bad things. It's really interesting. It's just narrative techniques.
It depends on what you focus on, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah. And I'll be the first to admit that some of this just happens to be like, just I had different hopes for where the Sylvanas character would go, and this didn't align with them.
Fair.
But yeah, I also just felt like let on. The big thing for me was just feeling let on. It's just like, oh, it's kind of straightforward. Why do we incite theories? It was so straightforward, but it's fine. It's all right. It's not like any other fiction I have ever done has really led things on and then kind of like dropped the reveals with a whimper. Hi, Star Wars. How you doing? Maybe I just don't like mystery boxes. I think I don't like mystery boxes, Taliesin.
No, RNG is bad.
Well, shall we wrap it up there since we are no longer talking about Revendreth even in the slightest?
Okay, I would like to ask you.
Okay.
How these cinematics, these Afterlife cinematics, have they changed your mind about any of the covenants, either in what you think about them generally, or even what covenants you would like to be a part of in the game and experience from that point of view?
I was already leaning a little bit more towards Maldraxxus going into this, having just, messed around a little bit on the alpha and finding that the zone was way cooler than I thought it was going to be. And then just like a whole warrior nation, on display in the short. It was just cool. It was just freaking cool. And so it's really making me lean Maldraxxus.
Wow. And yet
even more so.
Third favorite out of 4 in terms of the cinematics.
Yeah, well, that is the thing. Is like I still enjoy all of this. This is all fun as hell. Are you kidding me? Like I have my least favorite WoW cinematic, but they're all awesome, and I want to watch them, and they're just eye candy, and it's just like I love the Warcraft aesthetic. I always have. And that's the thing. Like I want that to be a disclaimer on anything we debate. Is just like I'm having a great time with all of this, and I just want to be a millennial nerd and nitpick fiction because that is apparently our generation's lot in life. But
Ain't buying houses, Garrett.
Yeah. So like it just doesn't matter. Like there's a part at the end of this where it's just like, yeah, it freaking looks cool, and it makes me like. It reminds me of like the surface level epic ridiculousness that made me interested in Warcraft in the first place.
Yeah.
Like I came for giant shoulder pads, spikes, and skulls, and Maldraxxus has that in spades.
Brilliant. Cool. So like the cinematics maybe helped you along that.
It really helped Bastion big time.
Oh, cool.
I thought Bastion was pretty dull. Like I came away from BlizzCon having played the demo being like, it's a little wheat heavy. like in terms of like giant fantasy concepts, like fields of wheat isn't a thing that gets me particularly excited. But the setup and of the state of Bastion when we arrive that happens in the Afterlives Bastion, I think did more heavy lifting than I think any of these. Like you can look at Revendreth, you can just look at one concept art painting of Revendreth, and I think you can infer that it has the tone of what we saw for Afterlives. But Bastion laid on some interesting nuance that I didn't have an understanding of going in, that I dug. So
that's wicked.
Yeah,
it's interesting. I'm because I'm speaking to people on my stream and stuff. A lot of people have had their minds who haven't played the beta and haven't had the chance to experience the zones themselves, and so had kind of set ideas about which covenant they wanted to be in and things like that. A lot of people are reconsidering their initial kind of assumptions and choices by watching these cinematics, and that will only change more when they get into the zones and actually play them in the game as well. So it's really interesting to see that happen. I think it happened to me when I played the beta, and it's happened to me watching these cinematics too. It's really fun to watch that happen with other people too.
Yeah, I agree. I'd say, I guess, really like Ardenweald and Revendreth. I think all three of them kind of everything except Bastion kind of aligned with my expectations. Yeah, I thought Bastion was going to be a little more like just in your face, like it's wonderful and peaceful and an idyllic heaven here. Instead of, it was more like, oh, there's ideological differences here. And it was interesting because it wasn't exactly where I thought it was going to go. And I didn't know where Ardenweald was going to go. And obviously we were dealing with completely original characters, and that was new in that way. But it was like idyllic, natural afterlife. Like it kind of aligned with my expectations in that way. So, which isn't saying even more bad because they did that. But yeah, I'm still tipping my hat to Bastion because I think it was interesting from a story perspective, and it weaponized fan service.
Yeah. No, I think it was awesome. What class are you playing as well at the moment? Sorry.
So recently I've been unsure if I want to level Alliance or Horde first. For a long time I was just like, I'm just gonna go Horde and I'm gonna dust off my Paladin Blood Elf main. But now I'm like kind of considering Alliance again. So I'm torn between Blood Elf Paladin or Night Elf Warrior. That's where I'm currently torn between.
So a Maldraxxus Paladin or Maldraxxus Warrior?
Pretty much, yeah. They're going to Maldraxxus either way as my first covenant, that's for sure. My first covenant is decided.
Interesting.
It's going to be Maldraxxus.
That would not be the professional choice for either of those classes.
Don't give a crap.
I know, and I think that's awesome. I think you are in the majority there as well. And you know, just go with what you get and make it work.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun for me. But anyway. So there we go. I think we have completely discussed the cinematics and in depth over the course of probably about 8 to 10 hours, something like that, over the course of these podcasts.
Yeah.
I look forward to doing it again next week when the Maw one comes out tomorrow.
You mean the Maw's like full cinematic and not animatic?
Well, I do think it's going to be a Sourfang style, high fidelity guy. Yeah.
Oh, that piece
but
of
I wouldn't
cover, man.
Definitely getting that. Here's the thing. It just wouldn't surprise me if it was tomorrow, with the date for pre-patch. But we're definitely getting the cinematic. Because they did not make that.
I would say that if I was in charge, if they put me in charge of, because this is clearly one role, deciding when cinematics drop and announcing patch dates, I would just announce the patch date and I would drop the cinematic the day the patch goes live, because I could see someone having not played WoW in a while watching that cinematic and going, oh, hot damn, this is awesome. I want to play WoW right now. And you want them to go and you want them to log in to new, shiny, awesome shit. Not the last week of BFA where everyone is just bored out of their skulls.
Very fair. Very fair. I think that's very fair indeed.
Yeah. But also, large companies sometimes have trouble coordinating things in ways that make sense.
Yeah. Well, the only reason I'm saying it for tomorrow is because, you know, it would fit if there were a secret Maw thing for it to be tomorrow, because it fits in the schedule, and also they really need to be making that announcement.
Also, because you're a content creator and you would like more to go on than just an announcement of a date. Yes,
I guess. I don't know. I also, you see, it's just as likely that there is an in-game cinematic which reveals like the story of the pre-patch, which, you know, you'll know.
That's true, yeah, because we got some rad in-game cinematics with the
story going on there, and we know that there's a cinematic that, you know, you get to the beginning of the pre-patch and people are like, oh my god, some big story's gone down, and you click on the box that says tell me about it. And then you get a cinematic. So we know that there's a cinematic there. Now, I don't think that's the high fidelity one, because frankly, it would involve some models that I don't think they're going to make for those types of I wish they would. I'd love to see those models in it, but I don't think they will. So I think
I might be weird where I almost I think I am damn near equal on my enjoyment of fully rendered CG cutscenes and then the very well done in-game ones.
Oh, me too. But seeing those like high fidelity ones, seeing what characters turn up in those is always like super exciting.
Yes.
Because like, you know, it's like when Thrall turned up, and he was like the first new character that turned up in that series of cinematics since the beginning, really. Because, you know, we saw Anduin, and we saw Sylvanas, and we saw Sao Fang, we saw Zappy Boy, all in like the cinematic trailer long before we knew there was a series of these things. And like they used all of those models, and Gen as well. They used all of those models. There hadn't been like a proper new model yet until Thrall in his fields of shitwheat, and it was so exciting to see a new main character represented that way. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. And there's a couple of characters who, if they did use that cinematic style to tell the story of the pre-patch, if that was that cinematic, then I'd be very excited to see them in that high fidelity style. But I don't think they will.
The Thrall one also then like doubled down on awesome surprises and showed us rogues, like undead rogues in full awesomeness.
And established stealth as literal invisibility.
Yep.
In canon, which is
it's
really
just, it works exactly like it does in the game. Even makes the same noise.
Yeah.
Which,
really cool.
Which I love, because that means that like it is canon that anyone who is, you know, involved in war in Warcraft get the same crippling anxiety when they hear that noise as we do as players as Warcraft. We hear that noise, we're like, no, I'm about to be stun locked. Like, that's great. I love that.
I'm still waiting for the throw a shovel's worth of ashes into the vague direction you think the stealth assassin might be coming from, like, move.
I would like hunters to replace flare with pocket sand. That's what I want.
Yeah.
That's what I want. Just pocket sand.
It would be awesome.
Great.
I just feel like sorry, you're right. Actually, there would be 3 characters that would need new models for high fidelity cinematic if that story were being told. All of those do have models in the in-game cinematics already. So my betting is that one.
That would make sense.
Yeah. So, but so equally, they could use that one to announce a pre-patch launch. Because I'm sure that's a stonking cinematic as well.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that, but we're right. We got multiple in-game cinematics with the Battle of Lordaeron leading into BFA.
Yeah.
And they were rad. Even if I did go, what about portals? And then I was just like, I don't care. Those flying ships look awesome. I got over it real quick. I will let a lot of things go if it just looks cool. Except apparently the burning of a tree.
Lordaeron, don't forget, that was pre-patch. That was the last.
That's exactly what I'm bringing up. Yeah, like I hadn't.
Best pre-patch we ever had.
And like
genuinely. And like we had Old Soldier, which dropped like the day before pre-patch, as a completely unexpected kind of build up to it, and told the story of like the night before that battle, like stunningly. I don't see how you could have possibly done that better. And then you had two cinematics in the actual scenario itself. You had Jaina arriving on her psychological ghost galleon, and you had which had been teased in the Warbringer, of course. And then you had the end, which was the recreation of Arthas killing his dad almost, and Sylvanas eating out of there. So yeah, it was.
Yep.
And don't forget, I mean, technically, of course, the BFA cinematic trailer happens during the action of the Battle of Lordaeron as well. So technically, if you're telling that story, you've got 4 cinematics within that.
You watch Old Soldier, you watch the intro cinematic, and then you go and play through the events of the Battle of Lordaeron.
Yeah.
Even though I guess the intro cinematic, it's close enough.
So 4 cinematics to tell that one battle, which is amazing.
It's pretty sick.
Yeah.
It's pretty sick.
And,
yeah. Sylvanas sitting in the throne almost smoothed over how annoyed I was by the Teldrassil stuff, because it was just so fun. That was such a fun villain moment. Just chilling in the throne. The posture, I became just such a pose nerd there. Like, just the way she's just like swoon over the freaking throne. It was so good.
Really good. They had fun with that. And that's the thing about baddies. When they're proper baddies, you can have fun with them, can't you?
Mm-hmm. You can.
A lot of fun. That's what I want to see happen in Shadowlands. But I'm really glad that we've got the jailer. I'm really glad that it would seem almost certainly, it's got to be 99% certain at this point, that there is a high fidelity cinematic featuring the jailer. I would imagine it's still to focus around Bolvar, but it would be really interesting to see the jailer in it as well. Lots to look forward to in the build up to this pre-patch that we don't know when it's coming out.
Yeah. So we'll see what the hell the topic will be next week. Maybe we'll finally get to do a mailbag, because there won't be much to talk about.
We will, Garrett. I think we're on a bit of a roller coaster from now on in, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have a WoW podcast again here at the beginning of a new expansion. It's stoked.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, folks, if you want to be part of the show, send those emails into wowkillercast@gmail.com. If you want to watch the video version of the show and you don't tune in live, you can do so at youtube.com/wowkillercast. Go sub over there. If you're a podcast listener, please sub to the podcast, because I know you can just stream it. You can look it up in the store and just stream it, but hit us with a sub. It helps the show out a lot. So, Taliesin, if folks are somehow completely unaware of where they can find your World of Warcraft stuff, where can people find you?
Taliesin and Evitel do games on YouTube, Taliesin and Evitel on Twitch, and Taliesin Evitel on Twitter.
Sweet.
All the good.
Wondrous. I can be found at Garrett Art on Twitter, where mostly lately I've just been tweeting on weekends when I'm trying my damnedest to get away from a computer. So if you're interested in soldering, I tweeted about that over the weekend. Yeah.
What did you just say?
Soldering.
Do you mean soldering?
Soldering.
Soldering means something very different here, Garrett.
Does it? Oh, well, that's how it's pronounced here. I am not going to Google that after this show. That's what I'm going to do.
I mean, please just don't come over here telling everyone that you've been soldering all weekend, okay? Or do, but you might make some friends that you didn't mean to make. That's all.
You know, I've never actually thought of what sawed off means. I'm going to have a feeling it ties into that Britishism.
What happened in Sodom?
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
We don't pronounce the L.
I just think maybe you should. I just think, like, you really don't want. Now listen, okay, like hands up here. You're not going to catch me ever criticizing sodomy or saying it could ever possibly be bad, because, you know, it's not. But I wouldn't want to get it mixed up with soldering. Put it that way.
Just means two very different things.
Any chance of getting mixed up. I want to make the word solder as different from the word sodomy as I possibly can. I don't want to get those things mixed up.
It's not
ever.
a thing in the States. It's not the term sod does not. The only time sod gets mentioned is when we're doing gardening in the States. That's when sod gets mentioned.
Gardening, and I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. You guys, you want to put it out in the open like that, and you don't. Here in Britain, you see, we're a lot more reserved. We do it behind closed doors, but you want to do it out in your garden like that. I think that's absolutely fantastic. Is that where the American phrase "good walls make good neighbors" comes from? It's like I'm fine with my neighbors. I just don't want to watch them doing their gardening out in the garden all the time.
I'm really just.
Sorry, you carry on.
The way you feel right now about the differences in language is how I feel about Canadian bacon. That ain't bacon. It's a disappointment.
I'm really sorry. Like, we haven't. This is really the kind of talk we should do after the podcast. But now I'm in. What's Canadian bacon?
Canadian bacon is freaking ham, which is garbage pork as far as I'm concerned compared to bacon.
Canadian people in chat, is Canadian bacon like European bacon, or is it actually like ham? Canadian bacon is our bacon, Taliesin. Oh, Garrett, grow up, mate.
Oh, it's the worst. It is disappointing.
So Danish bacon, basically. It's just not streaky bacon, which has been
disappointing. That's what it is.
Okay, now listen, I like both styles. I like European bacon and I like American bacon, but I will not hear a word against European bacon. If anything, I maybe like European bacon more, because when we have that, Evitel doesn't like it. She only likes American bacon, so I get to eat her bacon. So that's how I've worked out which one's my favorite, but I like them both. Don't get me wrong.
I think you should just go solder, Taliesin, and that's what I think. Folks, you can find this podcast and every other one I produce over at amove.tv, where I apparently use terms that are offensive in England. That's going to wrap it up.
Garrett, just saying, not offensive, highly encouraged, but I'm just saying, you know, people might be confused when you say I was soldering all weekend and now my guitar is immense.
Okay, all right.
Now my guitar looks, because I was soldering it all weekend. soldering and soldering and I had my head down, just soldering that guitar over and over again. And you know, I just looked at my guitar and I was like, "There's a guitar needs good soldering." And so I put aside a weekend and I just really went at it. I really went at my guitar and I soldered the hell out of it. And now it's great.
It sounds a lot better.
So not offensive, Garrett, just confusing.
Okay, all right. It describes a particularly intimate activity.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess so, but it's not like you're looking at each other, is it?
I hope you enjoyed this WoW Killer, everybody. It certainly went places. I have no way to segue out of this. We'll see you next week. Good luck and have fun. Bye now.
Well, that was an after-show conversation that crept into the show there, wasn't it?
It is legitimately pronounced that way here and just has never come up. Has never come up.
I've heard it before. Or maybe I haven't. I just didn't think anything of it because it wasn't on a podcast.
Maybe. Yeah, it's just like, I personally have never had a reason to bring up what you call soldering, which is just weird. But, you know, now I do. And, well, here we have it. It has been brought up in presence of a denizen of England.
A metal costume. Say you were cosplaying, right? And, you know, you'd made this amazing kind of paladin costume. Let's say you made your judgment armor, right? And you were like, you went to BlizzCon and you were like, yeah, here I am at BlizzCon. And the book, say, a bit of the book on your shoulder pad fell off.
Yep.
You would shout, somebody sodomy. I need sodomy. I need sodom on me.
We would never refer to it as sodomy. It's soldering.
No, but the act of soldering would be to solder, right?
Solder, yes.
Yeah. So you would say, if you needed soldering, you would say sodomy.
No, soldering.
You wouldn't say soldering me, would you? You'd say, somebody quick, sodomy. Like, sodomy.
Yes, but we pronounce our R's more harshly. So there's more of a at the end instead of an E.
Okay, solder me.
Yes, actually, there you go. Solder me.
Doesn't make it better, Garrett. I'm just saying it's a confusion that would never happen in Britain. But that's not saying it's better.
It's just never come up before. It's pretty great. It's pretty great. I mean, this is a great extension of your do what you can't discussion. That's what this is. That's what this is. It's those soft days, man, y'all. You and your soft days.
Yeah, we pride ourselves on them. We base our language around them. So.
We wouldn't know what elves sound like without it. What would we do? How would we come up with accents for high elves?
How would you ever have evil people in your movies as well? Like,
how would we have Bond villains, even though Bond himself speaks in a British accent?
Exactly.
That has always bothered me. It's like, yeah, they're all like British people are always evil, like in Bond movies. It's like Bond is British.
Yeah. It could be argued that Bond is quite evil as well, though, in fairness.
He's not the healthiest human being.
He's a bit colonial, isn't he? He's a bit old school.
We've talked about the concerns and the maybe less than virtuous character traits of Batman, and I would argue James Bond, there's some crossover there.
You friends.
There's a Venn diagram, and there's a large overlap between Batman and Bond.
Is that like James Bond is an embodiment of state-sponsored violence, whereas Batman does it for free.
Batman is an enthusiast of state-sponsored violence, but is not backed by the state.
For sure.
Yeah. And yet I love James Bond. I love Batman movies, man.
Batman looks at James Bond and says, I want to do that, but I just don't want to get paid for it.
I'd rather use my own money to do that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Boy, there's some parallels there I don't want to get into. There's some parallels there I really don't want to get into.
Yup. Anyone who's waiting for me to go to my stream and start my own stream, I don't think I'm going to today, just because I don't feel 100%, but also because I actually really need to crack on with this video, this class guides video.
You're not feeling well, man. I
still writing the script on that one, hoping to get it out early next week. So this, I mean, I will be streaming tomorrow, 100%, and I'll try and make it an extra long stream. I'll start before 3 p.m. if I can, UK time. So there will be a Thursday stream. But I think we just won't have a Wednesday stream today. It's always touch and go when there's a WoW killer, because if the WoW killer goes on a bit, then it kind of, which this one definitely did, then it tells.
Sorry.
No. It's kind of just more useful for me to kind of like get on with this video. As you can see, I spent my morning putting up pictures on my wall. As you can see,
you covered up the elephant. Oh, there's still one though. It's just cropped out in the overlay.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I got a tin of very expensive paint, because it turns out that the paint on this wall is incredibly expensive. And I had to pay 40 quid for a little tin of paint to paint over the elephants, and indeed all of the marks I've made hanging these things up.
Would it have been cheaper to just fully repaint, or did you just not want to go through that?
This is a big room, and it would have been more expensive to fully repaint. And also, I would have been covering really expensive, nice paint with cheaper paint, which seems... for the effort as well, seems kind of counterproductive. Fair. I could just buy a smaller pot of really nice paint and do it in 10 minutes. Anyway, so like pictures are up. I'll have more pictures up soon as well. My neon sign is coming soon as well. For a little bit. You talked
about that last week.
Oh, I know. It should be coming soon. It's been in production now for about 4 weeks, so should be getting here soon, hopefully. And that'll go up there. So yeah, I'm going to take the glass out of this Jaina picture so we don't get glare from the lights as well. But yeah, anyway, otherwise,
if you'd like to spend even more money, they do make glare resistant glass, but
they do, don't they? But I don't think this frame could take it, to be honest.
They do framing like where Katie works, so I have more knowledge of framing than I want.
Kind of like coverings for glass as well, but in my experience, those don't really work.
It's just cheaper and more straightforward to just pop it out.
Yeah.
Just watch the baby projectile vomit. You know, don't want that landing on the print. Well, Chad, absolutely. You have been absolutely delightful. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Taliesin and I discuss soldering. Apparently, so I hope you all have a good one.
Really get in there. Really, really go deep on something.
You have to. You want to. But you don't want to make a mess.
We didn't turn our backs on it, although you probably should.
And on that,
depends which one you are.